One day, a young monk approached his Zen master, seeking enlightenment. "Master," he said, "what is the sound of one hand clapping?" The master looked at him for a long moment, then said, "Go and meditate on this question." The monk returned to his room and sat cross-legged on the floor. He closed his eyes and tried to focus his mind on the question. But the more he thought about it, the more confused he became. How could there be a sound if there was only one hand? After hours of meditation, the monk was no closer to an answer. He gave up and went to bed, still troubled by the question. The next morning, the monk went back to the master. "Master," he said, "I have been meditating on the question, but I cannot understand it. How can that be that a single hand could clap and even make a sound?" The monk continued to be flabbergasted by the question. The master smiled. "That is because you are trying to understand it with your mind," he said. "The sound of one hand clapping is not something that can be understood with the mind. It is something that can only be experienced." The monk was silent for a moment. Then he said, "I do not understand." "That is because you are still thinking," the master said. "When you are truly enlightened, you will not be thinking. You will simply be. And then you will understand the sound of one hand clapping." The monk bowed to the master and left. He continued to meditate on the question, but this time he did not try to understand it with his mind. He simply let go of all thoughts and allowed himself to be. One day, while he was meditating, the monk had a sudden realization. He understood the sound of one hand clapping. It was not a sound at all. It was the sound of silence. The monk opened his eyes and smiled. He had finally understood the meaning. As he was walking away, he heard the master chuckle. "You know," the master said, "if you had just slapped your face, you would have heard the sound of one hand clapping." The monk was stunned. "But that's not enlightenment," he protested. "Enlightenment is whatever you make it," the master said. "And sometimes the sound of one hand clapping is just the sound of a good slap." The monk laughed. "You're right, master," he said. "I guess I still have a lot to learn." And with that, the monk bowed and went on his way, a little wiser and a lot more amused. The sound of one hand clapping is a koan, which is a Zen riddle that is designed to help people break free from their conditioned thinking. The koan is paradoxical because it is impossible to imagine a sound that is made by one hand. This paradox forces the mind to let go of its rational thoughts and to experience the world in a new way. The sound of one hand clapping is also a metaphor for enlightenment. Enlightenment is a state of being in which the mind is free from thoughts and concepts. In this state, there is no separation between the observer and the observed. The world is experienced as it is, without any filters or interpretations. The sound of one hand clapping is a reminder that enlightenment is not something that can be achieved by the mind. It is something that can only be experienced by letting go of the mind and allowing oneself to be. And sometimes the sound of one hand clapping is just the sound of a good slap. And if you think this kind of story resonates with you, you can follow or subscribe for more. Or share this message with everybody. Thank you for stopping by.